Hello horror fans! Now, I'm not sure how many of you out there have heard of a forthcoming piece of legislation here in the UK entitled the Dangerous Pictures Act. But if you're like myself and you're a fan of cult, horror or exploitation titles and you like to import uncut DVDs of these or view clips of them online, then you'd better be very careful what you're doing when this draconian new law comes into effect in 2009. Now essentially, the law is supposed to outlaw possession of images that the government describes as extreme pornography, which in a nutshell means any pornographic material that contains scenes of sexual violence in it. Now, you might be wondering what that's got to do with horror or exploitation films, but the problem here is that the new law has been so badly drawn up and poorly defined that virtually any material that contains sexual violence in it is liable to fall foul of these regulations, as they are open to such wide interpretation. Now the thing is, it's essentially creating a crime of context, which is going to be based on somebody else's subjective opinion. I mean, for example, the torture scenes in films like Hostel 2 are technically fine as part of a horror film, but those exact same scenes, would suddenly become illegal if they were recreated for a porn film. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not aware of the police or Customs and Excise being renowned for their art or film critic abilities. And obviously, films classified by the BBFC are fine, as they won't pass anything that breaks the law, but I can foresee problems arising for people trying to import unclassified films from abroad. I mean, if you take the films by the likes of Jess Franco, for example, his films might be a load of crap, but they do often contain a lot of excessive sex, nudity and violence in them, particularly those women in prison films that he did. And also, if you're familiar with some of Joe D'Amato's Black Emanuelle series of films, you'll know that they contain some fairly racy stuff in them, and of course there are all those Japanese shock films which are fairly close to the knuckle. I mean, if you've seen the first few guinea pig films, they've got a pseudo-snuff element to them. Now, if you're challenged, do you really think you'd be able to convince some prudish law enforcement official that those movies were not pornographic, even though they're not? I mean, you only have to look at films like the uncut version of Caligula to see where problems over context are going to arise, and similarly this law could also catch out people who are involved in alternate or gothic modelling, or people who like to visit websites like Owish.com. Now, considering the maximum sentence for possessing films or images that are considered contentious on this issue is something like 3 years in jail and listing on the sex offenders register, then I think that's something for everyone who uses the internet to be worried about. Now obviously, they've got to catch you first, but Customs do inspect packages from time to time, and you might want to watch what material is on your hard drive or in your internet browser cache before taking your computer to the repair shop. Now to go back to the law's central premise, I must say the one thing that does really trouble me about this is why our government feels they need to throw people in jail just for viewing violent pornography in the first place. I know this stuff's extremely distasteful, and some people might have a very strange idea of fun, but this material is actually staged by consenting adults and is perfectly legal in virtually every other European country, so I don't see how it can be justified jailing UK citizens just for viewing this same stuff. The absolute stupidity of this law can be highlighted by the fact that it makes no distinction whatsoever between images that are faked and images that are genuine. So that means scenes that are perfectly legal to act out will suddenly become illegal in image form, again, depending on the context, which is going to be based on somebody else's subjective opinion. Now, I can see there might be an argument there for outlawing possession of generally abusive images that were produced using unwilling participants, but considering this would be illegal to produce in the first place, and that there's no proof this actually happens, then I see no reason to bring this in, particularly as there are already existing international laws that could deal with any websites hosting these images in any case. If all that wasn't enough, you can even be prosecuted for extracting clips from legally classified BBFC films if they are taken out of context. Now, the UK is supposed to be a free country, and restrictive laws are supposed to be based on evidence of harm, but the government has pushed these through on the basis that they consider this material abhorrent, which is, purely a subjective opinion. Now, they admitted in their own consultation paper that there was no proof this material was abusive, or that viewing it had any detrimental effect on the viewer, and yet, despite the fact that the vast majority of respondents were opposed to this legislation, and despite the best arguments of a small number of MPs and members of the House of Lords, all arguments concerned were casually brushed aside on this in favour of personal prejudice. Now, the argument that laws to criminalise mere possession were necessary as they can't regulate material hosted on overseas websites in less stringent countries simply doesn't hold water as far as I can see. I mean, the reason other countries don't have such restrictive laws is because there is no proof of harm. Similarly, the old line that if it's illegal to sell, it should be illegal to own certainly doesn't hold true either, as, surely if this stuff is not illegal to stage for the camera, then it shouldn't be illegal to sell or own either. Now, I don't know about you, but this casual abandon of evidence-based legislation does not sound like the workings of a supposedly free country to me. And, when you look at the other restrictive laws that are being forced through by this current government, I'm really beginning to wonder just, what sort of slippery slope this country is heading down. If they can jail people just for looking at staged consensual material on the basis they consider it abhorrent, then what's to stop them using that exact same premise to ban horror films, action movies, or any other material they dislike outright in the future? I mean, one thing's for certain, it's going to be interesting to see how this one holds up against, European human rights laws, but until we get a test case brought against it, we're not going to know on that issue. Now, if you want to know who to thank for all this, then I would strongly suggest looking up a certain MP for Reading West named Martin Salter. He's been the main driving force behind this. Now, if you have a look at his website, you'll see that he seems to believe that old urban myth about people being routinely abducted and tortured on camera, to produce this stuff. Now, I think that means he's either an idiot or a liar, or possibly both, but, who knows on that count. But, anyway, I think I've said about enough on this issue now. I'm going to post some links up there in the left-hand column for you to take a look at if you want to know more. I would strongly suggest reading the articles by Julian Petley, as he's certainly a lot more well-versed on this issue than I am. But feel free to leave some comments or send me a private message if you have any questions about this, and I'll get back to you when I can. Hopefully my next few videos are going to be a bit more jovial, as I don't really want to start getting too political on here, but I really felt I needed to do a video and raise awareness on this issue, as this law is liable to affect a hell of a lot more people than the government originally intended, but we'll have to see what crazy laws the government tries to shove through next to see whether or not that rings true. But anyway, I'm going to post this up, you tell me what you think, and I'll see you later. Next time, dudes.